Fatiha. Selamun Aleyküm. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ve salatu ve selamu ala Resulullah Muhammedin seyyidil evvelin ve ahirin. Meded ya Resulullah, meded ya salat ve ashabi Resulullah, meded ya meşayihil destur. Ve neşallah fazla Şeyh Mehmed Adil'in Hakkani tarikatun as-sohba vel hayru fil cemiyye. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ahsan tahammül şey'i ennehu hayrun. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Asa en tekrehu şey'en ve huve hayrun lekum. Sadakallahul azim. Allah Azze ve Celle Kur'an-ı Azimüşşan'da buyuruyor.
Allah Almighty commands in the Holy Quran.
Bazı şeyleri sevmezsiniz.
There are certain things which may appear which you do not like.
Kötü olacak zannedersiniz size.
And you may think about these things that they may be bad.
Onda hayır olur.
However, there may be goodness and benefit and blessing in them.
Bazı şeylerde hayır zannedersiniz. O da
On the other side, there may be things about which you think that they are good,
şer olur diyor
but they turn out to be bad.
Allah Azze ve Celle.
This is what Allah Almighty says.
Allah Azze ve Celle insanın istediği değil de kendi istediğini yapar.
Allah Almighty does as He likes. He does not do as people expect Him to do. He does as He likes.
Için her olan şeyde bir hayır var diye
And we must know that there is a blessing, a goodness in everything.
bilmek lazım. Bazı sevmediğiniz haller oluyor.
Even in events or situations which we may not like.
Kendinizde, ailenizde yahut dünyada, memlekette
There may be certain things about ourselves, about our family, or about the world which we do not like.
nerede olursa şer gibi gözüküyor ama
And those things which we do not like actually appear to us as if they were bad.
onda hayır oluyor.
However, there is goodness in that too.
Onun için Allah Azze ve Celle'nin takdir ettiği şeylere itiraz etmemek lazım.
Therefore, we must not object what Allah Almighty has determined by His will.
Kendi aklından kıyaslarsan her şey ters gider.
And if you were to compare things to your own thinking, and if things would go the way you think, according to your own mind, then everything would go wrong.
Çünkü çoğu zaman dediğimiz gibi Allah sana hayır kastetmiş. Bir şey çıkıyor karşına, sana mani oluyor. Ne için bu çıktı bana mani oldu deyip derken öteki taraftan bir büyük bir felaketten kurtulmuş oluyorsun.
Because as humans we only have a limited sight and we only have a limited understanding of how things are. And there may be certain things which we desire and then we're prevented from achieving them. And people then tend to criticize and object Allah Almighty's will. However, it is through Allah Almighty's will that you have been prevented, and actually it is through that prevention that you have been protected from a major badness, and that actually from being prevented from this, you're receiving a goodness and a blessing.
Büyük bir musibetten kurtulmuş oluyorsun ufak bir şeyle. Onun için
even in those things which we may desire and we are prevented from obtaining, there is a blessing, because this prevention may be the means for us to be protected from a major calamity.
Allah'a tevekkül etmek müminin sıfatıdır.
Therefore, we must trust in Allah Almighty, and it is the characteristic of a believer to trust in His Lord's will.
İman edenlerin sıfatıdır.
It is the characteristic and the virtue of those who believe to trust in Allah Almighty in everything.
Tarikat ehlinin sıfatıdır.
It is the characteristic of those who follow the tariqah to trust Allah Almighty in everything.
Bütün Müslümanlık derecelerdir.
There are certain levels and degrees of being a Muslim.
Herkes kelime-i şehadet getirdikten sonra Müslümandır.
Everyone becomes a Muslim once he says the kalime shahada.
Her türlü ne yaparsa yapsın dinden çıkmadıktan sonra Müslümandır.
And as long as one does not abandon Islam, one continues to be a Muslim after having spoken the shahada.
Onların imanları derecelerdir o vakit.
But there are certain stations and degrees for faith, and there are certain levels of faith.
İslam'dan sonra imanın dereceleri var.
Because after accepting Islam, there are certain levels of faith one may achieve.
Adaful iman dedi. En zayıf iman olanlar var.
And there are those who have the weakest level of faith.
En yüksek imanı olanlar var.
And there are those who have obtained and reached the highest stations of faith, iman.
Onun için yani illa Müslüman oldum diye her şey istediğin gibi olacak değil.
You becoming a Muslim does not mean that everything happens according to your will now.
Yahut her şeyi kabul etmeyeceksin diye değil.
Or you becoming a Muslim does not mean that you no longer need to surrender to Allah Almighty's will and things happen the way you expect them to happen.
O zayıf imanı olan itiraz eder.
Those who object, those who criticize events and therefore Allah Almighty's will are the ones who are at the lowest station of faith.
İsyan eder. Ama tabii işte kendine eziyet etmiş olur.
Those who criticize, object, and come up and rebel against Allah Almighty's will, even though they are Muslims, they are at the lowest station of faith. And by criticizing and objecting, they are harming and oppressing themselves.
İmanı olan Allah'a tevekkül eder.
Those who have faith, however, strong faith, they are the ones who trust Allah Almighty.
Allah Azze ve Celle böyle istedi, bunun murattır.
Those who have faith say, this is what Allah Almighty has willed, and this is what Allah Almighty has decreed, and we accept it.
Bunda bir hayır vardı deyip
There must be goodness in it, they say.
ona inanması lazım.
And as believers with strong faith, we must believe in the will and the goodness in everything, as Allah Almighty decrees things to happen.
Her olan şeyde bu hayatta boşuna giden bir şey yok.
In life, there's nothing that goes in vain.
Müminin Peygamber Efendimiz sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem dedi, müminin hali iyide de, zorda da, kötüde de iman olduktan sonra hepsinin ecri, sevabı var.
And our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, described the believer, the mu'min, as the one who obtains and sees and benefits from every situation, whether it's good times or bad times or difficult times. A believer is not affected by something being good or something being bad, because the believer sees and recognizes the goodness in everything, and therefore the believer in every situation reaps the rewards and blessings of Allah Almighty.
Ona iman etmek lazım, isyan etmemek lazım.
Therefore we must be those who believe and trust in Allah Almighty and who do not object Allah Almighty's will.
Her halin, dünyanın hali böyledir. Evliyalarda bu hal bazen güzel sözlerden söylerler.
So do not let yourselves be influenced by the various states this world may undergo, because there may be good times and bad times, and the awliya Allah, The friends of Allah Almighty, the saints, they have described it so beautifully.
İşte Yunus, görelim Mevlam neylese güzel eyler der.
And they say, let us see what Allah Almighty has decreed and willed, and whatever He Almighty has willed to happen, there is beauty and goodness in it, they said.
Bu da çok güzel bir sözdür müminler için.
And this statement is a beautiful statement for the believers.
Mühimdir. Yani bunu akıllarında, kalplerinde kalması lazım.
And as believers, we must keep this statement in our minds and in our hearts, and be aware that everything happens by the will of Allah Almighty, and there's goodness in whatever He Almighty does.
Her şeyde bir hayır var.
There's goodness all in those things too which may appear bad.
Dünya şöyle oldu, böyle oldu diye üzülmeyin.
Don't lament the situations in this world. Don't object or criticize the states of this world.
Kim kazandı, kim kaybetti diye de üzülmeyin.
Don't be sad about who has won or who has lost.
Kazanan mümindir.
Those who win and will always win are the believers.
Onun için Allah imanımıza kuvvet versin inşallah.
May Allah Almighty strengthen our faith, therefore.
Allah zayıf iman olmasın bizden inşallah.
And may Allah Almighty protect us from having weak faith, but grant us strong faith.
ومن الله التوفيق. الفاتحة.